Welcome, welcome. If you're joining the room or if you're joining on the live stream, it's fantastic to have so many people interested in becoming a cultural gardener and looking after our cultural ecology as well as the natural environment at this time of great crisis. Okay, well, in the interests of starting on time, given that your time is precious, I would like to start. I just want to thank everybody who's come to this meeting, the first meeting of the Cultural Gardeners, which is an Australian cultural alliance for climate action, responding to the multiple crises in our natural world and in our culture. My name is Pippa Bailey. It's so heartening to see the number and range of people who've signed up to this initiative across all states and territories, across a range of art forms, ages, ethnicities, and even attracting people from other sectors. And we're not going to define what culture is. Whoever shows up are the right people to be here. Thank you for your time, particularly in joining in yet another Zoom meeting, especially those in Melbourne who've been in lockdown for so long. Before we launch into the purpose of this meeting, we want to start with a welcome to country. Of course, we're meeting virtually, and one of the challenges we face is how to bring place and country meaningfully into this virtual realm. I'm on Wongal land in Sydney and I'm driving the meeting today. So we decided with Norm and Sarah from Arts Front and Deb from Climb Art that we should follow protocols and reach out to the Metropolitan Land Council to provide the welcome. So it gives me great pleasure to invite Craig Madden to welcome us here today. Over to you, Craig.
Thanks very much, Pippa. Wujiri Gamarua, everyone, and g'day and welcome. As Pippa said, my name's Craig Madden, and I'd like to start by thanking Cultural Gardeners for inviting me online in these, I guess, unprecedented times to virtual welcome you to country. I'm a proud Bundjalung Gadigal man from the Eora Nation, and Gadigal land is the land on which I'm standing on here today. Junior Gadigal, this land is Gadigal. You know, I know Pippa's on Wongal land, which is part of our Eora Nation also. And, you know, it's customary for our Aboriginal people to welcome guests or visitors onto our land or country. It's a practice that we've been doing for thousands of years. So I'm extremely proud to stand before you as a proud Gadigal man and a representative of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council and welcome you all on Aboriginal land, my land, Gadigal land. We respect and honour our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders, past, present and future, and acknowledge the stories and traditions, living cultures of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples of this land. To any Aboriginal brothers and sisters, we have any brothers and sisters from the Torres Strait Islands, welcome. To all our non-Aboriginal brothers and sisters online today, a warm and sincere welcome to Aboriginal land, Gadigal land. Our Gadigal clan is one of the 29 clans which make up the Eora Nation. It's a nation that's bound by 3 distinct landmarks. So I've got the Hawkes River to the north, the Nepean River to the west, and the Georges River to the south. Within the boundaries of those mighty rivers, by our Eora Nation and the land of our Gadigal people, one of the 29 clans of that nation. To our guests from across the seas, from across our great country, great state, or these great states, or these magnificently beautiful city of Sydney of ours, or whatever Aboriginal country or land that you are standing on, welcome. On behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, I'm honoured to be part of the first Cultural Gardeners Conference, virtual conference. So on behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council and its members, our Gadigal mob, please enjoy today. And once again, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you.
That's awesome, Craig. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pippa.
And if for those who are joining us, if you haven't already and like to acknowledge country, could you please put that in the chat? I also want to acknowledge First Nations people, particularly those who've signed up to join us today. It's a great privilege to have you with us and to acknowledge that at the moment, there are 4 white fellas organising this because we have a bit of time and resource to do so. but we absolutely are committed to First Nations first. I'd also like to recognise that we're on Zoom, whose headquarters are in the San Francisco Bay Area, based on the lands of the Mwukma-Arlone tribe, and that they're the remaining First Nations people in that area. This virtual space is not simply a miracle of science, but relies heavily on resources, on devices built for obsolescence, bouncing across servers in multiple countries and to satellites in space that we are filling up with junk. Thank heavens there's a vacuum out there. Boom tish. I promise not to tell any more jokes. This is a town hall style meeting, not a webinar, although we know that there are people watching the live stream, but we're particularly interested in the action that's going to come from joining the Cultural Gardeners. And just to let you know today how today's meeting will be structured, Sarah, Norm, Deb and I will do some more introductions into how this has come about and what we hope to achieve. Then we'll split off into groups so that you can meet each other, because there are incredible people who've signed up for this, and we need to have as many incredible people on this journey and this mission as possible. So there are various ways that we'll ask you to participate so that we get some of your views and action, and then we'll talk about what we hope can happen over the next 12 months, which is the sort of experimental time frame we've put on the Cultural Gardeners. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So yes, thank you very much to those who are in the meeting to have your cameras and microphones off until we go into the breakout rooms. And just in case somebody's on live stream and then decides to join the meeting, it's difficult to have both on at once. I also want to acknowledge our Auslan interpreters and that this is also being captioned, and thanks to the people doing that for us. Now, I'm in the driver's seat, so I'm just going to start with a little bit of introduction of how this came about, but I'm going to also start with saying that I am the descendant of 3 colonising influences in this part of the world. The Welsh in New Zealand, the Dutch in Indonesia, and the English in Australia. My children are the 5th generation of my family to emigrate to this country, all born overseas, believing that the world was their oyster. That world, as we now know, is in crisis on so many levels, and I acknowledge my and my family's part in that story. This meeting is timed ahead of the Council of the Parties, COP26. I've been involved in cultural action at 3 COP meetings, in Kyoto in 1997 and then a couple following. And like Greta Thunberg, I'm not sure that we need more meetings when commitments made to the Paris Agreement following COP21 in 2015 are still not being met. So the focus of the Cultural Gardeners is shared action. What can we do in our places? What can we do together? The Paris Agreement signed countries up to decarbonise and noted that that would need social transformation. However, I'm not sure that we've been focusing on what that transformation is enough. After 25 years in the arts, I've spent the last 2 years working on creating events with local communities who face complex challenges. Putting community voice at the centre and co-designing solutions across systems that consistently ignore and deny them. I have had the great privilege of working in place with First Nations elders and cultural leaders and been schooled in how to privilege their views. I evacuated an event in 2019 due to the Sydney fires and have managed to create 5 events across COVID. So that work has enabled me to see that the social services and the education sectors suffer in similar ways to the arts, co-opted by ideas of business and market that have meant that basic services are in competition for funding, and that white people with privilege tend to control the flow of money and resources. That work has taken me into a lot of big conversations about systems change. Again, arts and culture were often missing, and as was meaningful action on the climate emergency, the biggest threat of all. So how do we transition our culture to a net zero future, reduce carbon emissions at least 8% a year, starting last year, and focus on systems change so no one is left behind. We've seen that with COVID-19, radical change is possible, and yet there's such a drive to back to normal. The Cultural Gardeners came about through some fierce conversations, and I noticed that Trish Hansen's on this call, because we both got involved with a UK group called Culture Declares Emergency, and I was adamant that we didn't start an Australian chapter, but actually that we started something of our own, because we've imported and imposed a lot of things from overseas, and in order to honour First Nations people, we need to be focused in our places locally where we are. I know we have a lot of work to do, and it can be very overwhelming. So part of the purpose of this is to focus on gathering people who have the same intention. And just a few little thoughts from me. First Nations first. It was great to see from the survey that 70% of people also wanted that. I have a little confession to make. I didn't think that we'd get quite so many sign-ups, so I can't access the whole thing because I decided to pay for a welcome to country rather than pay to upgrade my Survey Monkey. So apologies to people who've done that, and I can't access it. That radical localism is something that the environmental movement have been talking about for over 20 years. And so deepening our connection to place is really maybe part of the solution. And then noticing the supply chains that flow in and out. And as 80% of our population live on the coast, perhaps we also need to think of ways that we can make connection to the interior spaces that are being mined and fracked and are very vulnerable. I put my hope in reviving creative practice and processes, especially those that are low carbon, connecting our bodies, minds, spirits to place and new ways of seeing, hearing, smelling, feeling, tasting and sensing, and planting new seeds, partnering in new ways. I see huge opportunity for shared processes, and through the working communities can see that there's a real need to build imagination for what better looks like, so that we're moving towards something positive to disrupt the fear-mongering and feeling isolated and overwhelmed. When we get to the edge of our imagination, what seems impossible is where systems change begins. We need courage and enthusiasm for that work. So this is messy, emergent work, and we need lots of people doing it in big and small ways, in our own places, in practical and also intangible ways. By joining with others, we really hope that we can start something new and have those tricky conversations that will have meaningful impact. So that's way plenty from me, and I'm going to pass over to Norm from Artsfront.
Hey, hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining today's initial forum for the Cultural Gardeners. It's a very exciting day to kind of be involved, and want to start up front just by thanking Craig for that wonderful welcome to country, and also to acknowledge that we're here on the beautiful unceded Kabi lands of the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. I'm speaking on the behalf of the broader Feral Arts and Artsfront team. So Sarah Moynihan, who's here, Elliot Bledsoe, who's working with us on the Zoom, and also Bouvier, who's done all the development work. We're not going to speak for very long. Just want to kind of introduce ourselves and probably end up echoing quite a bit of the stuff that Pippa said in a sense. We're seeing from our Artsfront project, which is an Australia Council funded initiative 2030 visioning for developing a shared vision for the future of arts and culture. Really aligning strongly with the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals and also other international human rights agreements as a way to kind of take us outside the kind of limits and biases of domestic politics and give us a chance to connect with other people in other places in a way that's meaningful. At the end of I suppose as we're finding people are starting to poke their heads out from the other side of the pandemic and wanting to re-engage strongly and take action on climate. It seems to be one of the number one priorities for people coming out of that space. So in part from our perspective, this was a way to try and bring some of those different conversations together to share and set some sort of shared agendas for how we want to continue to work in this space. The platform that we're meeting on today, the ArtsFront platform, is one of the outcomes from the ArtsFront 20 project. It's currently in a live beta testing mode. There's around about 4,000 profiles already in the system, and it's supporting a lot of active live work like this in Australia and other places around the world. And it'll launch in 2022 in a way that kind of makes it broadly accessible to everyone else. I just want to touch on the core elements that have been coming through the ArtsFront visioning, because I think they could be useful for us today in sort of thinking about our own values as a group as we start to work together, and also to kind of underpin where the ArtsFront work has come from. First people's first is the number one principle underpinning all of our stuff. Artist-centered and artist-led is another kind of strong theme and vision coming through all of the work. Local action and global connection, and you'll see that more and more as the action around climate takes place. Access and inclusion, and we try to demonstrate that as much as possible with support through live captioning in Auslan and other measures to ensure that access is as strong as possible. And also obviously climate action, which is like the existential priority for us all. We'll let you have a bit of a look around the ArtsFront platform. The tools that we're using today are the event system. So we've organised this event through the ArtsFront platform, but we've also got capacity to have groups and actions and connecting those things. So as we kind of have the conversation today, one of the opportunities for us is to decide to set up a group that has an ongoing kind of role for communicating and collaborating together, and also identifying actions that we want to take on. And you'll see if you have a look on that that event platform that there's already, I guess, a bit of a sample action there in place. One that we developed prior to the pandemic kicking off, which is called Infrequent Flyers. It was just the idea of turning that frequent flyer model on its head and rewarding people for choosing not to fly and working out ways of collaborating that was less impactful on the environment. So you can have a bit of a look at that. You can have it. We're inviting everyone who's not physically in Sydney to go into Infrequent Flyers and put in your details and say where you would have flown from if you had to participate in that meeting. That data gets aggregated, and then the system can send that to the SDG, the United Nations and the SDGs as a report on the 13th Sustainable Development Goal. But thanks again, everyone, for coming in, and we're really looking forward to meeting more of you and working together over in the next 12 months in the climate and cultural gardeners.
Beautiful, thanks, Norm. Deb, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Pippa. Hi, everybody. It's really lovely to be here. And thank you, Craig, for that really warm ceremony. It was really a beautiful welcome and just a great way to start today. So, and thank you, Pippa and Norm. So much of, I guess, my thoughts and ideas around wanting to be involved have already been said, so I won't take up a lot of time with that. Just to, I guess, explain that my background was in the arts, looking after kind of high-level donors and corporate partners, sponsors, that side of development. And I did that for about 16 years with leading arts organisations. My last job was with the National Gallery of Victoria, and over that time I really watched the way that leading arts and culture institutions, as well as other public agencies, were being very much occupied by the sorts of people that were fundamentally hostile to worldviews that really valued and invested in creative practice. The sorts of people who sort of have an extractive and neoliberal mindset, rather than people who really actually get the arts and what culture is all about, and what the sorts of existential questions that we should continue asking, and certainly that the global pandemic has assisted with. I am speaking from Wurundjeri country, and yes, we very much have been in the thick of it, and we're very accustomed to Zoom. But Yeah, so Climate has been around since 2010 when we started these conversations around really, how to actually become more organised and more active within the cultural space on climate. A lot of the conversations were really quite uncomfortable at best. And that was largely because the arts is a space that has been so successfully co-opted by fossil fuel companies, the whole art wash game that I think we're all very familiar with. So it's been very interesting to see the way the public debate has moved. It's become very radical. You may recall that in 2007, Australia actually had what was recognised at the time as the world's first climate election, when the Labor Party came in with, Kevin, 2007, was it Kevin 07, and huge ambition to take effective action on climate change. So Australia has been in many ways a really interesting global player in this space. We are the mecca for both fossil fuels and for renewable energy. So if there's going to be a showdown, it's probably a really good place to have it. We are still a so-called democracy, although we can argue that certainly our democratic systems are really in tatters, but at least we've got the capacities to observe and meaningfully commentate on that. And part of today is really responding in an effective way, in a way that's going to have some teeth, I hope. So yeah, it has been a really interesting process to watch Australia have the arguably the world's most effective climate and environment policies, that, with the Clean Energy Future legislation and the way the absolute reaction to that took hold. But we had at least 2 years of seeing how incredibly effective it could be. So I think in some ways, whilst it seems like we're in a diabolical position in this country, we've also got some interesting tools to draw on. So yeah, I'm thrilled to be here, thrilled to have had such a response from the community, like so many of you who've come along, and you're all zoomed out as we all are, but it's very encouraging. I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you. And thank you, Pippa, for motivating us all. That big smile.
Thanks, Deb. So before we get into breakouts, as I've already said, and we well know, there are incredible people on this call, and you represent a whole lot more people. There's lots of representatives of organisations and networks and so on. So before we do that, I've just got a little question to ask, and we're going to do 2 of these in this meeting using Mentimeter. If anyone's familiar with that tool, I've just popped it in. I'm just popping it in the chat now. And the question is, what values do you think should unify the Cultural Gardeners Alliance? We want to generate this from the people who show up. We don't want to be dictatorial. So please jump onto that link and you'll be asked to put in 3 values that you think should guide us. I will share my screen to show you what's popping up, but it means the chat disappears. So I'm just going to give you a moment to jump on the link and pop those in. And at the end of today, we will be collating a bunch of the things that come up from this meeting, and we will continue to share that. Oh, lovely. Look, there's lots of wonderful words coming forward in the word cloud. And I'm going to pop the link in the chat again, just in case someone else has just joined, and I'm going to share my screen so that you can see what's coming up. Can people see that? I hope you can. Some wonderful words there: creativity, respect, collaboration, positivity, curiosity, sustainability, justice. Wonderful. Beautiful to see those words emerging. and lots of people with similar ideas as the words get bigger. Fantastic. Okay, I will stop sharing that now. Thank you very much for that input. And you can, if you haven't been to the link, you can go to the link. You should be able to see it in the chat. I'll put it there again. Now, the next thing we'd really like to do, and of course, these meetings are always tricky. I'm sure all of you are used to Zoom, so understand how tricky time is, but we really want people to meet each other. This is all about self-organizing. So we're going to, or Elliot, the wonderful Elliot, is going to put people into breakout rooms if you're in the meeting. And we would like you to take half an hour to introduce yourselves to each other, and then to talk together about what you hope, what you would like to see achieved, what sort of action you'd like to see. And then there'll be an opportunity to come back and share it. So please, somebody take up the role of timekeeper just to make sure everybody gets a go. And if somebody else could take brief notes and be prepared to feedback, that would be very much appreciated. So Elliot, are we ready to go? Oh, someone else coming in. For Keith, who has just come in, we're about to go into breakout rooms. And Christian, who's just come in, we're about to go into breakout rooms. So you're being asked to meet each other and talk about what you hope the cultural gardeners might be able to achieve, why it is that you've shown up to this meeting today. How are you going, Elliot? And I've forgotten something. My sincere apologies. If you would like the Auslan interpreter or the audio describer, could you please let us know by popping your name in the chat? You can actually direct that to Elliot if you don't want to put it there for everybody, but that will help him to make sure that that you're getting the services you need in the room that you're in. Here I am chatting away. You'd think I'd be used to it by now. Just to say it's lovely to see so many faces, having been just looking at your names on the screen. You can please keep your cameras on now, as we, for the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to feed back so we just get a sense of what has been discussed. I noticed that some people have dropped out and other people have joined in. Don't worry about that. Obviously, this will all be packaged up afterwards and you can watch the whole thing if you want to.
Shell was just saying, I just have to go now, but thank you.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Shell. Okay, so I don't know who's nominated to be spokesperson except Antonia, so I'm dropping you in it. Antonia, would you like to start?
Thanks.
A couple of minutes just to give us a flavour. Yeah.
Great. Hello, everybody. With Rosalind Price, Georgie, is it Cirillo? I hope that's right. And right at the last minute, Alicia Lilly and Pippa. Of course, Pippa is in our group as well. So we talked about our backgrounds, which was really interesting. Rosalind is a bookish visual artist and also a member of AEGN, which is an environmental grants network. Susan Zeller is from Gympie and is a retired teacher, but also a visual artist with a real passion for environmental education. Derek is doing a PhD in eco music and is really interested in works that connect community and also that really appreciate natural assets, and is looking for other like-minded artists. And Georgie was there from NAVA, who's in Canberra. So she's working at NAVA and also with Alan Giddy on an environmental research initiative for art. Who have I missed? Penny runs WAYA, which is Western Age Youth Arts, which is a youth arts organisation in West Melbourne, works with lots of people of colour who she thinks will be really passionate about joining this group, and really wants to, be at the forefront of making art sustainably, and also educating the young people that she works with as well. So I think, did I get everyone? I think I got everyone.
Yep.
So the kind of things in terms of what this group wanted to achieve, sharing resources was a really big thing, and even just knowing what everyone else is doing. So it's like, oh, great, I can talk to so-and-so about this and how useful that is. Not feeling alone. So just knowing that there's this whole group of amazing people doing great things that we can talk to and work together on. So collaborating, sharing resources, advocacy, and also lots of talk about actually how, site-specific, particularly art projects can really lead to sort of community action at a local level. So just remembering how powerful that can be to really kind of create change and sort of awareness in a community. And Pippa just wants small things like just systems change. So, and we talked as well about it being about being self-organized. So put information on your profile so that, it's easier for everyone to connect to each other around like-minded and relevant kind of areas. Yeah, how did I do, group? Is that good? Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I will now ask Brooke, and if you are a spokesperson, please put it in the chat. That's really helpful for those that have. Brooke, would you like to speak for group 1?
Yeah, I'm going to start by apologising for not being so organised, insofar as I was the nominated spokesperson in the last couple of minutes. So what it meant was that I didn't fully collect all of that information that I should have. So we also took a bit of time getting started. But we talked about, what were we wanting from this? And there was something about shared resources, certainly, and just briefly talked about theatre designers who are doing extraordinary work. There was, some theatre background as well as performing music background and visual arts background. But then we slightly sort of moved towards the end, and that was how can we be instituting more systems change, where I've mentioned briefly just asking my local council to bring in an environmental art prize, given that's still not spoken of, and what that would do is encourage artists to be talking the climate emergency more. But whereas Gemma had a bigger picture, and that was about asking more of the Australian Council with their funding, and how there's little of that at the moment that would encourage artists to look at that as they are making their applications. So we were sort of getting into that, back into that juicy bit before the breakout. So I think I'll just wrap it on that, unless, I think that's it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Brooke. I would now like to throw to Rosie for group 4.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Antonia. Welcome out of lockdown. Sorry, I've got to say it. I am so sorry. I actually joined our session a little bit later, so I didn't get the full rundown of everyone's practice or position in the cultural industries. So I'm just going to kind of go straight into what we got out of the conversation, which was really a bunch of questions potentially for cultural gardeners or for others. We noted that there's been really fantastic, amazing groundswells in community movements around this issue. COVID's obviously boots on the streets has not been seen for some time, and that momentum would be really fantastic to gather again. Of course, ScoMo and the woeful targets that we have at the moment was mentioned a lot. But what we resulted in was quite a number of questions that I'll read out, and hopefully it's not just all creative gardeners, but we've put it all on you guys for now. So how can cultural gardeners support direct action whilst we wait for the government to move more boldly on this? How can creative gardeners create a way to mobilise people to come out in huge numbers again? How can creative gardeners develop excellent mainstream media coverage for action and to ensure that First Nations voices are always at the centre of this? And Latai really talked about how really, they're really at the forefront of this and experiencing the devastating effects already, and doing some excellent works in terms of class actions already. How can creative gardeners affect policies to evoke change on a widespread societal level to support new ways of living sustainably? I think COVID has taught us that a policy can change human behaviour, and it's a really key takeaway, I think, for this particular issue and whoever's working in it. How can creative gardeners link in with big business who are operating well and making changes to be net zero to join this movement? We recognise that there's people, there's government, but there's also business and industry that are a really key voice and often, unfortunately, here, money speaks very loudly to this particular government, and that's a really key partner in getting change happening. How can we remove those who do not want to give up power that are part of the problem? Wouldn't we all love to know how to do that? How can we ensure greenwashing doesn't create a false sense of business doing the right thing? What targets, measures or reporting needs to be in place so there's actual a defence line against greenwashing, which we're seeing with the likes of Woolies and all of those lovely places already. A beautiful point from Bong, which was how can we increase the capacity for communities to defend and protect the earth when government and business can flip-flop so much? And just a final thought on a potential tool navigating those business and government powers was around integrated reporting, which really looks at economic, societal and environmental reporting. So it's a triple bottom line. And how can it actually be completely across business with an ATO type, judicator, because we know already that big business that may be making huge profits, if they were reporting on the environmental or societal level, would be massively in debt. So how can we sort of introduce that on a wide stream level? That's it.
Love it. That's a lot.
Pippa, can I mention something here, please? So I just want to add to that, Rosie. Seoul has just had a president who's just a volunteer president, just 1st of September. So I'm really new. I mean, he is really new, but he's had 30 years of corporate industry and sales and the like. And because Seoul has been predominantly creating projects on the climate change crisis, I'm kind of marrying community and culture and charity with corporate and disability and disadvantaged movements and non able people. So I kind of feel like, can we connect, Rosie? And hopefully next year Laurie will be more involved and bring corporate energy into what we're doing.
Thank you, Alicia.
So
Thank you.
Pippa, can you give Rosie?
You can do that through the platform, and we'll talk about that a little bit more.
No, that's what I'm saying. I can't.
Okay.
I'm technical. Can you give Rosie my details, please?
I will connect you. Yes.
My email. Thanks.
I think Simone is feeding back. Come on down, Simone.
Yes, I am. Thanks, Pippa. And thank you all the speakers beforehand. Rosie, what a great set of questions to ask. I'm going to go onto a different tack. acknowledging the weariness, acknowledging the tiredness of people coming out of lockdown, dealing with the pandemic, dealing with burnout. So I think that was a really common theme, and needs to be noted because we live on a planet with finite resources. And so we had, I'm just going to go through the notes I took. Forrest wanted to find ways to continue to take action, regular and ongoing change, even if it's local. Talking and planning is important, and action followed up by action is really thrilling. What are our priorities for action? We need to find a way to move beyond the extractive model, working in a way that flips that reciprocity, an obligation to where we live is a fundamental thing. And so to develop a sense of honouring and joy, to feel like you're creating positive action, that's not a responsibility, but that you embrace that responsibility. Jana talked about, at first, if I may say so, Jana was like, oh, I'm so weary, I can't think of anything. But then she warmed up and talked about our connection to land as a food grower, getting extremely local, and then using the food growing to look at a history of cultivation of the ground, and then linking that to our cultural amnesia around what has happened, particularly in first contact sites with the frontier wars. And so broadening that up into a bigger national conversation. And I also agree with that with the First Nations First principle, we need to find ways to support our First Nations brothers and sisters on their journey, and not have the burden of, for example, a little action, acknowledging, when we do an acknowledgement of country, we'll acknowledge that the Constitution doesn't acknowledge our First Nations brothers and sisters. So to take moments to actually be a bit more honest in that conversation rather than paying lip service. Feeling grounded, being grounded to locality was a big theme, whether it's through growing food and our relationship to land. Jenny Newell was really inspiring to hear about the work that Jenny's doing with other organisations like the big players, museums, Powerhouse Museum, Sydney Opera House, I think, pardon me if I'm wrong, Jenny. There's a group called the Sydney Cultural Change for Cultural Action, something like that. Seeing what the institutions can do together, and that's really thrilling, and I'd like to kind of follow that more because to get aligned with the money. Erica, she's a musician with Orchestra Victoria. Perfect match between Erica and Jenny, because Erica noted that their organisation doesn't talk about sustainability or climate change at all. So that idea of sharing resources then came up, and Tom from Ausdance talked about that. There's the subject matter of climate justice and using the arts, and then also the extractive economy, say, of touring, how that impacts. What resources can we share to mitigate and to use the work that we've been doing during COVID to keep that going? What tools are available as a practical resource to benefit beyond lower emissions? Knowledge sharing, research and resources. How is that information democratized? How does it benefit the sector as a whole? I think that's it.
Awesome. You're getting some applause. That seems like a great summary. Thank you. Deb, I think you were also speaking for a group.
Yes. Yeah, brilliant what all the other speakers have been contributing. We had people from dance and theatre and visual arts, and we had a really good chat about valuing arts and culture and learning and knowledge, and looking at research and modelling that has been done that demonstrates how phenomenally important the role of the arts and culture and knowledge sector is in our economy, and what forces have sought to denigrate that. We talked about how we can help arts organisations kind of unchain from fossil fuel industries the ways in which the arts has been, you know, in this country kind of almost surviving on funds from extractive industries, which is, you know, is obviously making them very vulnerable and is a very dangerous position to be in. We also talked about the need to get seriously organised, and we would love to see this group form a set of policies to take to the next election, and something that we can all contribute to and really nuance. We talked about the importance of maintaining a very local focus and yet being nationally connected, knowing who one another are, knowing how we can, you know, really, I guess, support one another in the work that we seek to do, learn from each other. What else did we discuss? Yeah, it was actually a really lovely, warm chat. There were just 5 of us. So Diane is, who has a dance background and spent most of her career living in Belgium and Germany, is actually going to get some hard data around the support that artists are being given in Europe, so that we can actually start to also create a very informed argument for why in comparable countries the arts and creative sectors are valued, where here they're almost you know, seem to have been left to lapse. Yes, so have I missed anything? Anyone that wants to unmute and contribute? Kristen, Margie, Vivian? But yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And are there any other groups? Because I am not quite across. Fantastic. Alex, please. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Room 2, there were just 4 of us in the room. There was Jane McCready, who runs Writing New South Wales, Xavier, an independent artist with a focus on environmental issues, Bryony Anderson, a designer at the marvellous Terrapin Theatre in Hobart, and myself, I'm the former National Director of the Australian Museums and Galleries Association, nowadays a cultural arts and heritage advocate and advisor. And I'll be very, very brief. We were thinking, apart from having a really lovely warm conversation where Bryony could only be seen but not heard, so she was busy typing her, and I could be heard but not seen. So, you know, we were very creative in our responses and interacting. But what we were thinking about was really a focus for cultural gardeners. We're thinking of, I think, 6 or 7 themes. One is, as cultural leaders, we do have an obligation to be tackling this issue of climate change. We do have an obligation as cultural leaders. Secondly, we should use imagination in our responses and what we do. Really, that's one of our strengths, and that's what we should be using. There was a previous speaker talking about national connection. That's right. We think about local focus and nationally connected, really critical. We also think that there is important the interaction between arts and so many other fields, for example, the sciences, and it's really important to look at that interdisciplinarity and that collegiality and the fact that there is cross-fertilisation and great excitement about these different fields coming together. We should harness that creatively and imaginatively. We should also think about cultural gardeners engaging creatives in ethical public messaging, linked with other groups. We need to be optimistic, focus on optimism, because pessimism really doesn't get you anywhere. So there has to be the optimism and the creativity. And of course, encouraging emerging voices in the arts to actually focus on this challenge as well. They're the main things that our darling little group managed to get together.
Beautiful. Thank you. Some wonderful directives there. Is there anyone else? Have I missed anybody?
Yes, may I, just stimulated from Alex, just made me think of next year on February the 19th, Sol is creating an event where our choir sings within the garden. We're collaborating with the Coburg mob. No, sorry. It's actually a gardening mob called the Coburg Commons. And so we're, dealing with, so I'm calling it GC, the CG Cultural Gardeners. We're literally bringing culture into garden. So, I think there should be more focus on, like we're based on this planet is Earth. I mean, literally, it's called it. So, we can't forget about our fundamental, soil. And that also aligns with the Indigenous elements too. So thanks, Craig.
Thanks, Alicia.
Thanks, Pippa.
We've just got 5 minutes left. So thank you all. One of the things that we have promised to do as organisers is to collate and bring this together in some form to share back with you. Obviously, the burning questions are next steps. As Norm indicated at the beginning, we have agreed between us that we will do 12 months as this first experimental, let's see what we can achieve in that time. It feels like having a time frame is useful. Obviously, we've got till 2030 to really turn this around, but let's focus on the next 12 months. I also just want to acknowledge that there's some fantastic links that both Latai and Bong have been putting in the chat to First Nations, Pacific Warriors. There's a whole bunch of action. So I will make sure that some of those resources are also gathered and put in a place where people can access them. I want to share another Mentimeter, which is just, and we've covered off a lot of this, but it's really just to give a last minute blast at what actions and themes you'd like to see for future meetings. And the idea is that we meet monthly. And I think because timing's always a problem, we might just commit to the last Tuesday in the month. I haven't cleared that with my colleagues, but I'm hoping that will work. Oops, I've just only shared that with Norm, which is not going to be very helpful for the rest of you. I'm sorry, Alicia, I'm going to keep pushing on because we've got three minutes. I've only got 3 minutes.
Tuesday, the disability, the arts access has every last Tuesday.
Okay. Well, we'll have a think about what the best thing to do. We'll have a think about the best thing to do. So there's a Mentimeter there if you'd like to put in your responses. Oh, there's some fantastic things coming up already. I will give you a moment more before I share my screen. The idea of this monthly meeting is also as a punctuation to your own action. It just is it may just simply be that you want to join with others and you can make a commitment yourself. It may be that you want to do more and the advocacy and some of the bigger ideas that we've been talking about, you want to get more involved with. And on that last note, we are looking for some people. This is the big pitch, people. We are looking for some people to join the steering group. And that would be, again, a monthly commitment so that we can try and further this action. We are white, middle-aged people. We are very conscious of that. As I said, we had some resources to put to this and we need more. We've already had Penny, she's had to go, but she's has thought of one of the young people at WAYA who she thinks would be great to join us. If you are up for it, please let us know. And I also hear all the things that Simone was saying about weariness, and really part of what we're also hoping this can be is regenerative. As gardeners are, if we can spend time with each other in this garden, hopefully that will help put some of the great anxiety and overwhelming horror of the situation at bay a little bit. So use this in whatever way you need to, and please tell others if you think of others who might like to join. I'm now going to share my screen because it's looking very rich and fabulous in terms of what people are looking for. So some wonderful changing the conversations, valuing the arts, yes. Policies, cross-sector collaborations, cultural leadership, artists getting paid. Direct action. So, I mean, the other thing we talked about in our group that I also think is really worth sharing is just that there's activism, there's cultural workers and artists, and there's some of those things are completely together, and sometimes there's space between those things, and that is welcome. I just want to thank you all again for joining us. I will throw very quickly to Norm and Sarah and Deb to see if they've got anything last minute to say, but we're just hitting 2:30. Over to you guys.
Just to say thank you to Pippa for being the driving force behind this first stage of stuff. And we've got some ideas for expanding this this event into a group, and so we'll put those on the table. We just posted in the chat the idea of establishing the Cultural Gardeners group and having everyone who's joined us today as founding members, and then working out how to build the membership and the activity from there. We'll also kind of create some little resources to take people through and provide some support for any of the kind of technical side of using the platform to people to create their own events and create their own actions. But to start with, we'll schedule, you know, a series of monthly get-togethers once we've kind of settled on a date that works, and use that as our, you know, as one of our primary ways to collaborate and to share.
And just wanted to say thank you, and looking forward to the 12 months ahead.
Awesome. Deb?
Thank you so much from me too. And yeah, Pippa and Arts Front and Melissa and Amber and Elliot for all the support actually bringing this together. It's quite a tech, it's an impressive tech inspiration. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, so particularly, yes, thanks to Melissa and Amber and Ray and the other name, which I've now lost. Forgive me for not seeing the other name. And thank
Marissa.
you all, Marissa, forgive me. Thank you all so much for coming. It's been a wonderful first meeting. Go well.